Okay, welcome to Kubernetes SIG Cloud Provider for August 13th, 2025. Um, we are governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct. So if everyone can treat each other with respect, that would be fantastic. I am adding to the chat a link to the agenda doc. Please feel free to put your name in there. And we have a couple of exciting agenda items today as well. And I think I want to start probably with let's just jump right in and welcome our friends from the Crow Project, um, Jesse, Amin, Matt. And if you want to, Jesse, if you want to go ahead and share and tell us what you're presenting today, that would be fantastic. And you
Yeah,
are muted. There you go.
yeah. Um, yeah, we can jump right in if that works.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I don't do slide decks a lot, but we got a deck just to organize our thoughts. Let me see, I can share.
You should be able to share a window.
Mhm.
There you go. Perfect.
Does that work? Does everybody see that?
Looks great.
I decided to do a PDF so I didn't have to struggle with like presenter views and stuff. So yeah, thanks for giving us some time today. Super happy that we're here. We're Amin and Matt and I think Matt is here, are here, and others may join representing the Crow project, Bridget as well. So we're just going to talk a little bit about what Crow is and more importantly, why we're here as SIG Cloud Provider this morning. So this is just a quick take of the project. I wanted to start by saying this is a real project that exists. It's on GitHub. We're in the 2,300-ish stars space, which is pretty much organic growth. This is a mostly a word of mouth type of project. We're actively hosting 2 GSOC mentees. We have over 70, I think over or exactly 70 unique contributors. We have maintainers from AWS, GCP, and Azure, and potentially more in the near future. Beyond these 3 CSPs, we're really excited about this project. So it is a Kubernetes native structured framework for resource group orchestration and composition. What does that mean? The project aims to effectively make it simpler to work with Kubernetes resources and to orchestrate their state and to compose your own custom resources in a simple and scalable manner. So the project set out to abstract and sort of make it easier to use the existing extensibility in Kubernetes, namely sort of this operator pattern where we extend the APIs of a Kubernetes cluster through creating CRDs and operators. There is a lot of overhead in that. It's incredible magic, but also maybe you don't always need all of that power. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's what we wanted to do. And particularly the initial sort of motivation is to enable standardization of this pattern. So we can standardize deployments and resources across multiple environments. We are in particular, we're interested and found the collaboration with our friends. I'm from AWS, by the way. I didn't really introduce myself. So those of you who don't know me, I'm Jesse Butler. I'm in the EKS service team in AWS, as is Amin. So when we were talking about this, we really wanted to standardize what we see as a pattern of more and more infrastructure as code coming into Kubernetes leveraging the KRM. And AWS, Azure, and Google are all finding a common cause there in that we all need that, and as well as other service providers and other projects. So why are we here in particular? It's still pretty early days for this project, but there's a lot of momentum. Like I said, there's a lot of organic growth. There's a lot of interest. We have a very active Slack channel, a lot of contributors. Most of our contributors are coming in as end users who are interested in shifting the bespoke work they do in this space toward a more community-centered project or even an emerging standard. We find that a lot of Kubernetes end users are doing these, managing these types of patterns in their own way. And we meet at conferences and we talk with them as customers and collaborators. And we're like, yeah, I do that as well. I do it this way. I use this bash script and duct tape. And so what people are really excited about with this project is that they can leverage that energy and put it towards something where they're collaborating. Um, Meanwhile, we do need a better solution, especially as most end users are in the cloud and not one cloud. So, folks at Azure, at Google Cloud, at AWS, at OCI, we're all interested in building a new solution to solve this problem, and ideally not multiple solutions. We don't need 4 or 5 different ideas here, which makes it just a struggle to leverage Kubernetes as the standard that it is. So we're hoping that an alignment with SIG Cloud Provider, ideally as a sub-project, is a place where we can better establish the project as an emerging standard and grow Crow as a community. So kind of stepping back a little bit, like why Kubernetes composition? Why does this matter? Infrastructure as code is just a default. It's just table stakes at this point. Um, we're facilitating the lifecycle management of external application dependencies, infrastructure, right? Building Kubernetes clusters, creating databases, in a cloud service. This leads to this dual state problem that end users have been struggling with for a while, where you have an IAC stack that is external to the place where you're reconciling all of your workloads. It makes it really complex when you get to hundreds of clusters across multiple environments, across multiple clouds and on-prem to kind of reason about the state of any given situation because you're always context switching. So for about the past 5 years, at least Azure, AWS, and Google, but as well as others, have been working toward a Kubernetes native extension of their APIs, which can help start to solve that problem. So we have ACK at AWS, KCC at GCP, and ASO at Azure. These are tools that live inside a Kubernetes cluster that allow you to provision these resources and remain in the cluster. But as users mature, they look to simplify, right? As you're scaling, you want to make this easier. And we find this idea that you want to pull all of these moving parts into a single atomic thing because it is just the dependencies for web app 2, right? You want to make this simpler. The case for composition here is reflected in, like, wouldn't it be nice if we could do this rather than having stacks of external IAC? We just have a single hinge and a single lever to orchestrate a collection of underlying resources, databases, object store buckets, whatever it is, into this uniform lifecycle management opportunity with this single Kubernetes resource. Which rhymes with a lot of other projects, right? This pattern is not new. We did not invent this, nor did anyone in the Kubernetes community, right? It's arguably go back to Gang of Four and look at composition notes, right? Like composition is a good thing. It helps us reduce friction and increase scale. There are a lot of projects that have composition as a feature. Typically, that is one of many other features where the real explicit value to the community isn't necessarily compositions. And what happens is that you have now multiple ways to do this, right? You have multiple composition strategies and tools, which means we don't have a standard and we're not all working in the same direction. The opposite problem occurs around lack of standardization in that all of these projects offer all this additional value where maybe I don't need that. Maybe I just want to glue 2 resources together and manage them together. So we end up in this position where you have to bring in an entire end-to-end project with all of its tooling and things just to get one thing done. So we see a lot of customers at AWS, Azure, and Google, but also just like hobbyists, people building things for universities. They're all pursuing the same problem, and they go down this road of like building operators, having CRDs, and all this. So if we consider a native resource orchestration composition solution as a missing feature of Kubernetes, it becomes clear that we have an opportunity for this collaboration, standardization, and working together. So why this project? So there was a team at Google that was working toward this, and they heard through, I think at a conference, kind of hall track, they heard that we at AWS were working on something. Soon after, some folks at Azure in the open source community heard about that discussion. So long story short, we all got in a room and got some pizzas and said, what can we do together? Um, so rather than all of us pursuing different ideas, we decided to put all the wood behind one arrowhead and work together. Our really early tenets for this were mostly around vendor neutrality and scope. What we don't want to do is encroach on other projects and that additional value I talked about. We just want to build a Kubernetes feature that everybody can use, including those other projects. We want to make sure then that we work with any resource that's available in a cluster, regardless of who vended it or where it came from. We want to offer a compelling solution with a project. You don't want to stand up a whole GitHub repo and a Slack channel to do a sort of interesting thing. So we wanted to make sure it really meant something. We wanted to simplify and improve, right? Any change, in my opinion, is friction. So if you're going to induce the friction, let's make sure it's to a better end. So we want to leverage existing patterns that, that we don't reinvent the wheel, kind of honor what's come before, but make it simpler. And there's sort of this tenet that we all aligned on that any code that doesn't actually implement business logic is really just tech debt. So as you have this bespoke operator pattern simply to glue a couple of resources together, that starts feeling pretty burdensome, and we could help end users remove that tech debt. So kind of aligning on some of that, particularly using some of the emerging technologies at the time in Kubernetes, we embraced some of the patterns that already exist. So Cell was a big thing for us, and Amin in particular, when we were working on our project, said we have to use Cell because this is the direction that Kubernetes is going. That turned out to be correct. So there's a really nice integration there that feels like you're just building with Kubernetes. As a side effect, you get a lot of value out of these compositions with effective type safety, simplification of composition. Um, the way that Crow works, which we'll talk about during our demo, is that we can infer the order of the resources that you're defining, which greatly simplifies things. You don't have to worry about the order. It's sort of like the white space in YAML thing, right? You don't have to worry about what order you put things in. Crow will infer the ordering of resource operations under the covers based on your specification. And we, like I said, wanted to extend the existing technology. So under the covers, Crow is effectively authoring, installing, registering a CRD for you for your custom resource, which is why we call it a resource graph definition. It's basically an abstraction for a CRD, and it just uses a single controller. So that Crow controller dynamically adapts to meet the needs for your new CRD, which means that you don't have a ton of new operators, a ton of new controllers running. Crow just scales and adapts as needed. If we look a little bit before we get into the demo, just to explain some of the moving parts, there's two parts here. One is the spec, which is effectively a representation of what you want your CRD to look like. This is how your end users will consume your resource. And here you can see, you can choose which configuration to expose, which is great for platform building because it means you can also optionally choose what to hardwire in as immutable values. So when I showed the example before of 6 lines of YAML that can represent a bunch of cloud resources and other Kubernetes resources, all of that configuration is just built in and immutable, which means that you can version prescriptive resources for your platform building or for your application building. And it also gives you an opportunity to set sensible defaults and build some basic deploy time logic. The other part, once you define that CRD, is the resource specs. So under the covers, there are just resource specs. And we're using a part of the project, which we called simple schema, to simplify all of this. So you define the CRD as you'd want it to be seen, and then the resource specs land in. And this can be any resource that's available in the cluster where you install the RGD. So any existing native Kubernetes like workloads, deployments, jobs, it could be a config map, but it also could be anything else. So for example, if you have ASO and Azure CRDs available, you can build with, cloud resources as well. What you can do here using Cell and the config injection is you can have simple logic that infers sort of from these resources as they get created and their actual values get filled in. You can inject configuration across resources. So you can see that as an example here, where we have the CRD, the resource definition comes in with a select or match labels. We're going to use that. Um, Here you can actually take the state of any of the underlying resources and inject them into other resource config as well. And I think that's probably enough quick look. We can actually jump into a demo. And if anybody has any questions, we obviously will leave time, but if anything flies by and it seems a little weird, just let us know. But I will pass the screen share over to Amin and we can, or actually I'll just drop it and now you should be able to share.
Great, thank you, Jesse. Can you see my terminal?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amin. I'm one of the co-maintainers and also work with Jesse on various things. Anyways, today I have a very quick demo for Crow showing its strength and how, I mean, one of its simple use cases, as Jesse showed you before, like in the slides. What typically you want to do in Crow is provide some sort of CRD, and in this situation, it's called a Kate's full stack, and say that for this stack, you want to have a deployment, you want to have some number of replicas, and you want to enable some cloud storage, some object storage. So it could be either an S3 bucket in AWS, or an Azure blob storage, or a Google cloud storage. We don't really like care about the implementation under the hood. All we care about is having an object storage behind the scenes. If you typically wanted to do this, you will have to define a CRD. You'll have to write a controller using Go or another programming language. You'll have to package it, build it, deploy it into your cluster, so that you're able to move from this instance or like this resource into like real Kubernetes resources behind the scenes. One of the other ways you could achieve this as well is using Helm charts or any other tools in the ecosystem. But it's very hard. I mean, not very hard, but it's very special if you wanted to do it the Kubernetes way, as in I want to give you an API version of kind. I want everything to look the same. And this is what Pro is strong for. It's like we're just gonna give this. So all we have to do is apply what we call an RGD, which is a definition of our graph. Technically, behind the scenes, everything is a graph. So in this situation, if I wanted to deploy a deployment, a bucket, and an ingress and a service, they will be like related in a way or another. For example, I want my deployment to be created after my bucket, or I want my service to be created after my deployment is ready. With that said, looks like I already have the RGD in here, and I can show you what an RGD looks like when we describe it. So you can see here that Chrome reconciled the RGD, and it says that, hey, it is active. I'm serving a new CRD for you called Kate's Full Stack. It's V1 Alpha 1. And it's also like observed the topological order, meaning that it knows how to deploy your applications behind the scenes. It's going to go and create a storage first, then a deployment, a service, then end with an ingress if you need it. And we'll talk about that in a bit. So in this situation, I should go and apply to see what will happen if I do an instance. Just FYI, I'm going to do a get here to show that I don't have any. I only have a default Kubernetes service, so I don't really have any resources in here. And if I go and apply the instance, by the way, this is just the instance I just applied. So if I do now get Kate full stacks, you can see it was like in 9 seconds, or everything was already created. And if I do again get deploy as service and buckets, You can see that I got a deployment that has 3 replicas, which is what I asked for in here. And then since I enabled storage, I got an S3 bucket created called SIG Cloud Provider one-shot dev. Now, the interesting part is that if I go and do, let's say, if I want to edit my full stack, colors are not working for some reason, but we'll deal with it. So all I want to do is literally go and modify the replicas. So I'm gonna move from 3 to 5. By the way, I'm gonna move my mouse in here so you see what I'm modifying. I just changed 3 to 5, and that's all I have to do for Pro. Uh, uh, oops, oopsies. Okay, I have to do it again. Um, okay, hopefully now the save is gonna work. Okay, it works. Cool. Now, if I do git deployment, I should see that I have a 5. So Pro is watching the resources and instantly modified things. Um, as you see, like everything is declarative. We don't really have to deal with templates or anything like that. And if I wanted to do maybe something more fun, I can go and in the spec, I will go and enable the ingress. So something we didn't see there, or like in the RGD, so I can go and do ingress enable true. And
You've already got an ingress element there.
oh, really?
Yep.
That's a good one. Okay. So, oh no, I didn't have one here, but do I have anyone created? No, no, actually I don't.
Oh, you said the field in the resource.
Oh, you're right. Okay,
Yeah.
see. Okay. You're right. Thank you. So I want to flip this one to true and be like, hey, now I don't have an ingress in the cluster. I'm hoping that Crow will create one for me. So if I do uh, get pod, you can see that I have an ingress in here and then all the resources that I need. So basically, I don't have to deal with templates or anything similar. I just can do everything from Kubernetes, the Kubernetes way. And yeah, now that we've seen the output, let me tell you how we instructed Crow to do all this behind the scenes. So the RGD looks like this. As Jesse showed, this is where we define the CRD. So we tell Crow like, hey, can you go and create a K8s full stack CRD for me? Here's what the schema look like. I need you to publish some status fields using cell expressions. And this is exactly where we mentioned, or like where we defined the deployment, the service, the ingress, and the object storage, which is a bucket in here. So the user does not see that it's an S3 bucket, but it's an implementation detail. Um, maybe the last thing I'm going to show in here is the cool thing about the deployment in this situation is the environment variables. You can see now Crow not only created the buckets and the deployments, but it also injected the environment variables and the information about the bucket in there, so that the deployments could be able to use our buckets. And yeah, that's it. I hope I didn't steal a lot of time.
No, you're totally fine. I mean, we still got plenty of time. It's a good demo though.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amin. And then Jesse, I think you had a little bit of wrap up as well.
Yep. I got a couple more slides. Yeah, thanks, Amin. That was awesome. So yeah, you've seen it now in very short flight. So what does that mean? Like, what can you do with this? And what we always try to think about in the project is what are the problems we're trying to solve and what's the UX like? So these patterns that we are seeing seeing the project enable is certainly authoring and distributing custom resources, right? And like typically these are like platform building blocks or application building blocks. It's a really simple way to build higher level abstractions for fairly complex underlying configurations. It is effectively like having a full stack IAC with all of the sort of more modern IAC accoutrements, right? Like Terraform modules or CDK L2 constructs, this ability to glue things together, but it brings it directly into the Kubernetes cluster. which means that you're bringing the resource management as like aligned with your external resource management. So for example, cloud resources, but also, you might have an operator for your, sort of on-prem network load balancing engine, right? Like you can have any type of resource here, just play along with other resources. It really also simplifies the CRD authoring through simple schema. Um, it's not rocket science to build an operator, but the problem is that while it's fun to do for me on my laptop, it's not my day job. And people who are building platforms or managing applications at scale, it's effectively burden, right? To build and manage these operators with the CRDs without really any business logic behind it, right? It's just a matter of pulling things together. So simplifying that, you can see how that works, and reducing that burden for these custom bespoke operators. I've talked to end users that have, two or three. I've also talked to end users that are at scale, have 50 or 60 of these, and they would love, and actually are actively, some of them, moving toward Crow. Um, so that brings us to what's next. I'd said it's early days, and I'm getting older, so maybe everything is early days. I don't know, but we're less than a year in to really like kind of ramping this project up. There's been steady interest and contribution really since the start. There's been a ton of community input. I think our last community meeting was dominantly a conversation between a couple of end users and a couple of our maintainers with ideas they have, things that they are building. Our very first external pull request actually came from an end user in the first week, and it was real code. And we were like, well, this is something. This is very cool. So our most recent milestone, we hit 0.4. We've been iterating, trying to get a couple of the major features that we had on our early whiteboard, plus features that we've rolled in from effectively community input, trying to do a couple of those per minor release. So 0.4 just came out a couple of weeks ago. That brought optionals, E2E tests. We landed a lot of foundational stuff for status conditions. And we have 6 new contributors for that version drop, which was really fun. And 0.5 is next. That brings collections, which has been something we've been iterating on. That's effectively gives you lists, right? Collections of resources, groups of resources. We also, Barney's been working on pruning, I believe, and then the status conditions will land as well. So the next major goal is code complete for us. We're working toward getting these features in and getting to a place where we can start stabilizing and doing things like scale testing and making sure that security is all in good shape. We're anticipating code complete for this September, and then we'll just continue to iterate. From pretty early on, we've decided not to set dates on the calendar, but more kind of functional milestone deliverables. So while we're trying to set some expectations with the community around when they can expect new releases, we're really still prioritizing, is the thing ready? Does the thing make sense as a release? But we're thinking about September, we should be code complete, and then we'll just continue to iterate on non-breaking changes, non-breaking features, and mature as the API stabilizes. So that brings us again to why we're here today. From very early on, we wanted the project to be effectively a Kubernetes feature. We want it to be very specifically scoped, not trying to boil the ocean. We also didn't want to build yet another competing big project with its own logo and t-shirts and whole community. We wanted to see if we could build something for everyone to use. And this is why we started in the open and invited specific projects to collaborate and join us, and very quickly tried to find a way to get to self-hosted vendor neutral governance that's very similar to the CNCFs. We're all inspired by and have been involved in the CNCF for quite a while, so it made sense. We've kept our scope, I think successfully, have kept it intentionally focused, and we'll continue to strive to do that. So now we're basically looking for a home to scale the project and to sort of take that momentum and turn it into emerging standard work. We also really are excited about the idea of just more crisp governance. It's one thing to say we're CNCF-like, but for a lot of us who've been around for a while, it's much easier to be a CNCF project or a sub-project or community. And the big hope, honestly, like from the very beginning, is that we would land this project somewhere that it would be vendor neutral and it could sustain over time as a Kubernetes feature. And that is why we're here talking to you about adding it as a sub-project. So thank you. Yes, I have a slide for thank you too. And yeah, we can talk about any questions or anything. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I'm gonna start by pointing to Almiko and having him ask his question, and then I would love to hear from anybody else who has questions or comments, because I know we have some other Crow maintainers on as well. Almiko.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, like Jesse, thank you. That was a cool presentation and good demo and everything. Um, I think this is really exciting and whatnot. I'm curious, could you talk a little bit about like the provider specific detail parts of Crow? Like, are there bits of code that are provider specific there, or are there plugins, or how is that end of things kind of managed or maintained or whatever? How does it work, I guess?
Yeah, that is something we tried to avoid from the beginning. So it works with resources that are available in the cluster. I don't know, Amin or Matt, if you want to dig into that a little bit more, but high level, I will set the stage and say the mission here was to not have to worry about providers or plugins or external libraries, and just to say, hey, it's in Kubernetes, so it should work with the resources that are available, which means a stock kind cluster, it's going to work with all the Kubernetes resources, deployments and config maps and secrets. But if you install something, then you get those resources as well. So any CRD that's installed. Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, basically what you said, Jesse, it's like a layer cake, right? So whatever operator you've got. So for example, I'm of Azure Service Operator on the Microsoft side, that may be your base layer, like you install that first. And, at the beginning, you may not even realize that you want something like Crow. You're just sort of making your Azure resources and doing your thing. And then eventually you're like, well, hold on a second. I've got sort of more complex orchestration. And Jesse called out one of the really key features here is the graph ordering happening automatically is quite powerful, right? Like in Kubernetes, mostly things are eventually consistent, but in the cloud, it's not always the case, right? Like you really do need to make the database before you make the thing that writes to the database, because otherwise, like you're going to have a bunch of problems. The fact that Crow figures that all out for you is quite nice. But the nice thing is, like, you can start in that simple world. You just deploy, your operator that isn't Crow. And then when you realize you need sort of an orchestration engine, you can just deploy it on top and start using it. And there's no like cloud specific bits in Crow. It sort of defers that to the layer.
Okay, that makes sense, and I kind of figured that was the direction you were going in, but I guess to the notion of like, okay, there will be common patterns for like, like you mentioned, ASO, for example, like I might install that operator and then I've got a bunch of like, recipes or whatever that I've put together for my organization. I guess, have you talked or given any thought about like, is there going to be like a place where people might share recipes and whatnot, or is that all left up to like the individual users and whatnot?
Yeah, I could take that one. I'm sure other people have thoughts. That felt to us that early on it's a great idea. That felt to us like it would be external to the scope. That starts feeling, yeah, so Artifact Hub, exactly. Like we could absolutely do that. And as you've seen, like with Amin showing the short demo, you just got a little blob of YAML. So you can put that anywhere. It's fairly easy to think about OCI distribution for that little blob of YAML. So you can create an OCI, which should be called an OCI artifact, but we still call it an image. That's one of my pet peeves. Yeah, like you can envision a world where like maybe there's a CLI that lets you like kind of publish these things and share them around. So certainly part of part of our thinking, but not something that we think we would land in the scope of the project, just trying to keep it pretty core. And that means it's not opinionated, right? So you can come up with a system and I can come up with a system, and those are fairly independent. And it's nice that we have something like OCI distribution as a standard. So we're not all reinventing that wheel too. That's my thinking.
Yeah, no, that makes good sense, and I appreciate the kind of extra context here and everything. And part of the reason I'm asking is because I think we've been thinking about SIG Cloud Provider over the last several months, and kind of like we've been doing some work to change our charter and everything. Because originally this SIG had existed really to help manage the interactions between the internal cloud controller managers and whatnot. And we've expanded a little bit to bring in projects like the API server network proxy and whatnot. But where I'm kind of thinking about the SIG's involvement in this is like, okay, traditionally this SIG has been, kind of a meeting place to bring together all the different, cloud provider interests and whatnot, and make sure that we have a common set of technology that works for everyone. And I think that fits into a lot of what you're talking about here with Crow. But I'm trying to understand, like, okay, where are the boundaries here in terms of,
Yeah.
this SIG has traditionally tried to be a place where, okay, yeah, Azure, AWS, Google, Equinix, everyone can come and we can talk about the common problems and then solve them. And I would hope that would be the same with Crow and everything. But I'm just thinking about the future. It's like, okay, will there be a need for this kind of thing there and whatnot? But I think, and I guess to play devil's advocate, it's like, uh, to me, thinking about Crow, it's like, okay, well, is SIG Cloud Provider the right place, or is this more like a SIG apps type thing or something where we're thinking about more like workloads and whatnot? Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's what should happen, but I'm just thinking aloud here and kind of like I
Sure.
said, trying to play devil's advocate a little bit.
No,
But
we've had the same conversations, and the connection that you made is the same one that we made, a little while ago, where thinking like SIG Cloud Provider had a mission, fairly well mission accomplished. So as you're expanding, thinking about your charter, where does that lead? Crow is this maybe a little bit backwards, this is a little upside down, just because we thought that the space for innovation was a lot richer in compositions. So Crow is sort of the punctuation mark at the end of a sentence, which should be like, all of the cloud provider extensions are seeking a standard. And so Walter, who isn't here, I think he started a doc with us where we're talking about, well, we do have ASO and ACK and NKCC and other cloud providers have things. There's no standard there. We all have similar features, things like resource adoption, immutability, read-only fields in a spec. How do you standardize that? So that's another piece of this that isn't even part of this presentation right now, is that we're thinking that could be part of something and in a way that we all contribute as well. Because really getting to a place where I think there's always this thing with like a tool and the tool is open source and therefore it enables multi-cloud or multi-environment. And we all know that in practice, that's not always true. There's an incredible, I hate to name drop other projects, an incredibly well-adopted IAC resource, right? That tool, you say, oh, I'm using this tool and I can just run anywhere. And the reality is 80% of your code's different between wherever you're running it. And that is because those underlying constructs are not standardized. And so if we look and say, well, ACK, KCC, ASO, others, right? Alibaba's got a solution. OCI's been working on some things. They have these features that look similarly and functionally they are the same. Let's see if we can do some work there too. So it's sort of like Crow could be this flagpole that we build that resource standardization work around. I think that's our thinking.
yeah, thank you so much for kind of expanding the context there. Really appreciate it. Who else has questions?
I know that Walter is not here to speak for Google, but perhaps if Barney wants to speak up at all, just because we haven't heard from our Google friends yet, and we have heard from our Amazon and our Microsoft friends. But do you want to tell us a little about your perspective?
Sure. I'm sorry, Walter's kind of held up in another meeting with Justin.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
But just from your perspective, like where do you see this being useful for you as Google?
Absolutely. So we started off an internal project that precursor to Crow because customers are asking for it. Our team owns the KCC, which is the equivalent to the Azure service operator, essentially a Kubernetes interface to API for the cloud, consuming cloud resources. And customers are happy with it, but pretty soon they were asking for high level constructs. Then we started building that into individual KCC resources. and then soon realized that's not going to scale and we cannot meet every requirement that a customer has. So then we were thinking maybe we should build something on top of KCC, and we were trying out something, at which point you guys collaborated and we thought, okay, let's build something that's common across clouds and cloud providers. And that's how Crow came up. And so we are excited. So our ex-product manager who's still on the call has reached out to a lot of customers, and we have received positive feedback from them, essentially validating this idea. And we believe that, building this and expanding on this idea would be, as an open standard, would be a good thing. That's our perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you. And yeah, Nick was on the call. I think he dropped, but we'll, give him his due as well. He went to a startup and stayed with Crow, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, thank you again, everyone from the Crow Project for the exciting insights. Elmiko, you have more to add.
I just wanted to, I just wanted to say, like, I really appreciate kind of the due diligence that you did bringing this here. I also really kind of appreciate the fact that you've put together kind of a community and everything, and it looks like there's good community support there. I think that speaks really well to the project and kind of the direction you're going. And I think primarily for me, though, one thing I've heard from everyone here is kind of like a connection back to the user stories, and I think that's super important. And so I love to hear that, like, this is something that's really being impactful for the users, because I think, like, for me, that's like where this all starts and ends, right? If we're solving a problem that people are having out there, like, I'm totally happy to see this stuff go forward. So anyways, yeah, like what Bridget was saying, thank you for presenting and whatnot. I really appreciate it.
And yeah, and thank you again for having making the time. That's been great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Jesse, if you want to drop a link to the Google Slides of the presentation, perhaps into the document, that could be helpful, just so people have a link to that. And then I'll go ahead and hand it over to, and then next steps, we will, the tech leads for the project will confer, and we will get back to you offline. And if we're moving forward, we'll start with a, lazy consensus on an issue. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, and let us know if there's any issues or PRs or anything to cut. We'll jump on it. Again, thanks for the time. Really appreciate it.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Wonderful. Okay, we don't have too many other agenda items. I'll hand it over to Elmiko to talk about your next topics of adding leads to SIG-owned repos. What do we got there?
Yeah, this is just kind of like a quick follow-up and everything. We've been working on this, I think, for several months now, but we got the AWS one all cleared up. I wanted to give big shout outs to Kirthan for helping there, and just kind of like, he's been a great peer to work with in that repo and whatnot. So now that we have that one done, I'm probably going to start with, like, I'll go look for the next SIG owned repo, and I'll probably just take this one at a time, because I don't think there's necessarily any rush. But just wanted to give folks an update and say thank you to the AWS devs who helped us out there.
Awesome, thank you. And I think I know the sigs.yaml, we're supposed to, go in as we make any edits to sub-projects. We also should clean up whoever our contacts are, etc. So
cool. I'll make a note of that.
As you work on each of them, if you want to just make sure we've got the current contacts. I know it is that season, people move around. So
yep. No, that's a good call out. I had forgotten about that. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. And then one other topic as well, you had some cloud provider Equinix.
Yep, just following up on the, we had talked about this 2 weeks ago. I just want to make sure it doesn't fall off the, kind of the chart or whatever. I'm still tracking this. I'm kind of getting together the resources to announce the deprecation and then start making some movement there. I guess for anyone who's maybe watching this or here today, if you're looking to do more work in SIG Cloud Provider, please reach out to me, because I think there is definitely some work that could be done on the Equinix provider to kind of clean up the tests and get things working again. And that is definitely work that can be done without needing an Equinix account or access to their infrastructure. So if anyone out there watches this later and would like to do more in SIG Cloud Provider, please reach out to me on Slack.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Almiko. Let's see, do we have any other topics people would like to bring up? All right, I can go ahead and take a quick look through open issues. Let me share. If this works, this should work. We've got the, take a look at the open issues first. This one was going, there was some discussion on it a couple of times ago. You had said, Almiko, you had said that you had intended to close it, but then it looks like the SIG Network folks weighed in with a bunch of topics. Did you have any thoughts about this one? I saw Joel also commented on it. The
Right.
not ready nodes.
Right. That was why I didn't go back in because it looked like some discussion had come up. And so, I wanted to kind of let that play out and everything.
Mhm.
But yeah, maybe it's time to review it again and actually close. I don't know.
Well, I'm kind of curious just because, Antonio is putting a lot of thoughts on here. So should this just belong to SIG Network at this point? Like I'm trying to figure out if SIG Cloud Provider should be in the mix here.
Yeah, maybe that's just a good comment we can add for today. Just like, hey, just ask Antonio, like, does SIG Network want to accept this for triage or something? And like, we would like to close it if no one's going to work it, But if it's interesting to SIG Network, then yeah, like maybe transfer it to them or something. Like the interesting thing about this is I've been having a bunch of like discussions internally. And one of the ideas that I've been thinking about recently, and it would, I'm not saying it would necessarily solve this issue or anything, or maybe Joel could comment in here, but like I'm almost starting to wonder, like in the cloud controllers now, we have a node lifecycle controller, right? I'm starting to wonder, do we need to propose some sort of service lifecycle controller that could help to manage these extended, like, because right now I feel like people are piggybacking on the service reconcile that happens inside the CCM to leverage other things. So like, oh, so when it reconciles, could you also have it checked to see if it's healthy? And if it's not healthy, could you have it like recreated or something, wild like that or whatever? And I'm just wondering, like, do we need to start thinking about perhaps some sort of service lifecycle controller so that we can have a more, I guess, like a more detailed integration with the load balancers that are created in the cloud provider? Like, do we need to increase that? I don't know. That's kind of like something that I'm just curious about.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think this is what I should comment? Or do you think there's more you want to add?
Um, yeah, like I mean, I guess it really depends. Like, if we think we need something, like if we really want to get into this, like load balancer, health checking, and all that stuff. Like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's tagged for both right now, but like if we don't think we see something we're going to work on.
I mean, you could just note that, like, Elmico has some thoughts about, do we need a load balancer life cycle controller or something? Because I think that would give us the opportunity to like improve the CCMs, to do something that I don't think we ever thought about doing like 10 years ago, which was like, do these load balancer devices have health checks and stuff like that? It's like, well, now we know they do, and we also
Yeah.
know there's all these other extended conditions. Is there a reason maybe to start looking at that? Because like when a node goes away, the node lifecycle controller handles this like, kind of extended set of actions that happen. So if we had a service lifecycle controller, it could specifically check to see, okay, did the load balancer go away for some reason or did it change? And if it did, does that mean that services need to be updated inside the Kubernetes cluster, or do they need to be like, marked as invalid or something? Or does the load balancer need to be recreated? Like, there could be different action depending on what the specific infrastructure needs or whatever. It's really an open question for me because I haven't investigated it deeply.
Right, right.
But I know
Okay.
like I know there are people on this call like Marco and Joel, just calling you out there who have looked at some of this load balancer stuff. So I don't know if you have any thoughts
Okay.
that would kind of move the needle at all, like Marco or Joel.
Do either of you folks have input here before I close up this one?
I think at the moment, if this is the one I think it is, there's
Mhm.
basically a gap. Could you scroll up to the top
Yeah.
of
This is the nodes that are not ready,
the?
but they were added to a load balancer pool.
Yeah. Okay. So this is just a gap in the implementation of the OpenStack CCM. So we've already fixed the issue in other CCMs. There is a proposal and like a whole cap about it. I think from their perspective, they really should just be implementing the cap and migrating their customers over, or their users even. I think Antonio and Tim were just kind of explaining how things work.
Okay. So you're saying that like instead of us needing more controllers, this is a specific implementation that has not implemented the cap?
It looks like it to me. If that, yeah, I'm pretty sure that the comment I left was kind of around like we've done this in other places. One,
Yeah,
three,
we had
four.
mentioned the part about the cap in one of the previous comments too.
Yeah.
And there didn't seem like there was much reaction to that other than we should, it should be put in the core, cloud provider, which didn't like after Antonio's kind of comment about, like label density and stuff like that. It made, I don't know, it just made me wonder.
Okay, so it looks like
Yeah.
you've gotten specific here about the cap. So I don't think I need to repeat that.
Yeah. So the comment above is the one I left around like, yeah, we've already done this. Like there's a whole
Yes.
cap about it. We've implemented it in other places.
Yes.
I don't think there's much more needed here.
Yeah, so like if Antonio and Tim don't have anything from the SIG network side, we probably can just close it.
There is, however, another issue that's kind of saying that there isn't enough. And they would like more control over the nodes through reconciliation of like labels and annotations. So that one might, there is some overlap between the two.
Oh, okay. So that's a different issue though.
Yeah. But it does kind of the health check implementation, they do need to update, but if their load balancer implementation doesn't behave in the same way as the kind of ones that do on the hyperscalers, it may not even help them still. So we might
Gotcha.
need to come back to this depending on the result of the other one.
Yeah, and the other related one was really where I was thinking more about the service lifecycle controller.
Yeah.
Like I still think it's an idea that we should revisit at some point.
Okay. Do we think this is adequate for the specific reply? Because I do want to give SIG Network folks a chance to accept this before we just close it on them.
Sure.
Okay. All right. And I think that was the only one that was, sorry, the only current one. These are older, and those are much older. Looks like we maybe still have a GCP flaky test. Did that get discussed?
Yeah, it's like we need someone. I think the issue that we looked at is like someone needs to look closer who has GCP expertise.
All right, Barney, you're on the call.
I'll talk to Walter. I'll see what's
Yeah.
up.
See what's up with that. All right, awesome.
Yeah, we just need an engineer who knows the GCP infrastructure better to look at it. Because like I looked at it and it's like, okay, I get what the failure is, but I don't know GCP well enough to diagnose it further.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I'll drop the link in the chat just to make sure we have that handy. And then we also had, I saw some, this is something else.
That looks bad.
Yeah, like this is just in the periodic tests. Why did the link go right to the provider GCP periodics? Interesting. Okay.
That's just what we use for
Oh, okay, that's
GCP's
what,
got the most thorough CCM testing currently.
okay. Well, we don't usually see that, so.
That's not good.
So that is linked right off of the test code review. That's the link we're using. If you're
Right, that's
curious,
the one we
Barney.
normally check because GCP has the most number of tests. Like we scope down the tests on AWS and Azure. So like GCP at the moment has the most thorough implementation of the tests. So that's the one we tend to check all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, this
What do
looks
we
bad. I have to imagine someone knows about this in test info.
probably? Maybe we should mention it over on Slack just in case. Be like,
Yeah,
hey,
could
have
you
you seen
click on
this
the first
lately?
failure just maybe we can see like what
Yeah.
if there's anything to be gleaned from. Container runtime black box testing when running a container with a new image should be able to okay, so this could be related to some sort of like this could also be related to the GCP like registry secret provider or something. So this is probably if there are more failures like this in the history, this probably also will require someone from GCP to take a look, like or someone who knows the registry credential controller well enough to debug that. Because it's like not being able to pull from a private registry, that's part of some internal tests that we got set up there. That's not cloud provider specific, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. Okay. All right, well, that is what we've got on the agenda thus far. Um, before we close out, I did have like just give Jesse and Amin and Barney and Matt credit for sticking around this long. And I'm going to throw one more question at you. So I hope you're still paying attention, Jesse. Um, which is, hey, it feels cool and great and flattered to be in, the fact that you're interested in SIG Cloud Provider. But probably the most basic question of all, why us? Like we got a good sense of what Crow is about, and we're like, why Crow? Crow sounds great. But like, why does it seem in your mind that SIG Cloud Provider is a good choice, as opposed to any of the many other parts of Kubernetes? If you've scoped it to, we should be part of Kubernetes. Where's the fit for in SIG Cloud Provider in your mind?
Yeah, I think that Amico kind of asked that too. Like I think API machinery was one that we were thinking if we're going to focus on SIG. So first of all, let's address that. And again, I'm kind of representing myself in this response. So Matt, I mean, Barney, like if you have other input or even you yourself, Bridget, if you want to self answer. But I think, yeah, in short, a SIG makes sense because we want to look at this as a way to standardize as an emerging kind of a community effort. So similar to how like Carpenter landed in SIG autoscaling, it could have been in other places. That was the place that made the most sense around that intent. So API machinery could maybe work, but then we also really want to leverage this as a way to also standardize the underlying resources that extend cloud APIs. Right? Effectively, we have KCC, ASO, ACK, other projects that extend those cloud SDKs effectively. So if we can use Crow as this rallying project around which we can standardize the underlying resources, that's like a win-win. And then it very clearly feels like it would be, in my mind, aligned with your kind of refactoring your charter and looking at more standardization around how Kubernetes interfaces with cloud providers. That's my take. I don't know if other folks like Matt came back on camera. I don't know if you want to add to that or just.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is a really compelling argument, but I do just think from the people involved, like it's the folks who ended up being Crow maintainers, we sort of met one another because of the asks of our customers. Is like, as I mentioned, I'm an ASO maintainer. Like, there's KCC maintainers, there's ACK maintainers, and so like the people involved came from the sort of cloud specific tools that then the users were asking for Crow. And so I do think like that's part of it as well, that even though obviously we built things to be resource agnostic, right? And it works for anything, not only for those resources, we were coming from that, well, like the orchestration and ordering is sort of most interesting for cloud resources because like standard Kubernetes resources mostly don't need that. Like Kubernetes takes care of eventual consistency for you. It's more interesting when you get into like the cloud specific things where you really want like, oh yeah, it's actually a graph and this feeds into that. It comes up more in that context. So I think that's part of it too.
Definitely
Thank
agree.
you. And I realize we're running long and sorry about that. Barney, I see you put a +1. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before we wrap?
Sorry, yeah, I got kicked out of the room. But
Oh gosh.
pretty much I was thinking pretty much what Matt was saying. Essentially, we had the biggest requirements, and SIG, cloud customers had the requirement that we were trying to solve. Who knows? It seems to be the right fit at the moment.
All right, thank you. And then I'll toss it quickly over before we wrap to Almiko and Joel for any further questions or thoughts either of you have as tech leads for this project, since this is in your hands. Anything else you want to know from the maintainers?
Something I was wondering is, would you say there are competitive projects within the CNCF?
Yeah, that's the piece that I was calling out. Like, this is a feature of other projects. I think that's kind of the way I look at it. For example, like Crossplane, or even outside of the CNCF. I don't know where Cradix's product is right now and what open source components there are, but there are other projects and other solutions with their own logos and own t-shirts and own communities that have compositions as part of that, but they're all different. And some of them are really part of that ecosystem, right? And it doesn't express, sometimes those features don't express themselves as, the missing Kubernetes feature. They're more like a feature of Project XYZ. What's nice about standardization, even if we think of this as a merging standard, right? It could take years to find a standard, right? Like, I'm not being presumptuous. I've done a lot of standard work before. The nice thing that if there is momentum behind an emerging standard, it tends to multiply. And so and we talked to for in particular, like the Crossplane project, we have a lot of friends there. One of our most active non-maintainer contributors, which, is actually is Scott Nichols, who actually works at Upbound and is involved in Crossplane. So that's a space where like, hey, that maybe that's a whole concern that project doesn't have to worry about. Like they've done it, others have done it, and maybe now we can all do this and they can work on the other things, which they like honestly, their real bread and butter is in the providers and like abstracting everything, which isn't our mission at all. Right. So that's sort of the thinking there where like, yes, there are things, and honestly, we braved a lot of potentially explosive PR when we first started this project because there was a lot of like, why are you stealing the thunder from XYZ project? I like that project. So do we. Like that's not the mission. The mission
Why
is
do you hate Helm? Why do you hate Terraform? Why do you hate
yeah,
Crossplane? And we're like, we play with all
yeah.
those.
Yeah, and like there's YouTube videos that are very like just clickbaity and like look, that's part of the world we live in. That's fine. That didn't come from us. And in fact, every chance we get, we say, nope, that's not the mission. Crossplane maintainers heard about this project before the rest of the world did. It was still private. And we're like, hey, you should know about this. Totally fine. So that's kind of what we're hoping is that this will balance out. And this feels a lot like what we now refer to as the container wars, which at the time when we were present, we didn't think of it as a war. It's only that way in people's blogs now looking back at it, who maybe weren't even there, right? We had a lot of emerging competing ideas. Everybody wants to move fast. We don't all get in rooms all the time and talk about what you're doing versus what I'm doing, and you end up with 5 different solutions. This is a space where it's just become a constant end user scale friction. It is a pivot point for which you go from we're building a platform to we are running and operating at scale. It's just a good opportunity to sort of say, hey, what if we do it this way? Minimize the scope of this one little building block, this one little permit. Maybe we don't even have a logo. It's cool. It's just part of Kubernetes, and now everybody else can kind of move on. So that's I don't mean to speak so much, but this is you've hit a point where like I'm really passionate about this project for that reason.
That's kind of, yeah, you hit on. So I'm familiar with Crossplane, and I was like, oh, this feels like part of Crossplane, and it's really positive to see that you've been involved with them and you're kind of talking with them. I don't know if this has ever come up, but do you see a future where Crossplane 3 comes along and actually all of the bits that they do that overlap with Crow are now Crow?
It's funny. I think that might actually be two, right? I mean,
Oh, it
because I
is.
think a lot of that, yeah, a lot of that Crossplane 2 stuff was like, well, what if you didn't have to worry about that and you worked on the other things that are very Crossplane specific? Because there's so much more to Crossplane, right? There really is. There's so much more value there than just the compositions layer. And it's maybe something that Crow makes it easier for them, right? That would be a great outcome rather than Crow competes with them. Like that's not the goal. Which is again why we are looking at a SIG and not like a CNCF project, right? Like landing this in the sandbox becomes then the sixth or seventh version of the theme without all the rest of the nice stuff. Like, why would you do that? Whereas in a SIG, as a project that's focused specifically on this, it becomes something everybody can build with. If they so choose. They don't have to, obviously. Also the beauty of this is like this is all evolving.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
I think I really appreciate Joel's question here, and because for me, like technically, there's a lot of interesting stuff here. I think you've made some good cases for why this may fit with this SIG and everything. But I think there is going to there is like kind of a political reaction to this as well, right? Like once the SIG decides like, oh, we've adopted this project as a sub project, and then if others outside, and I'll just keep using the crossplane example for now because it's convenient. Are the crossplane developers going to be like, whoa, 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 whoa? Like, why did Kubernetes like backdoor this thing in that does the same thing that we do? And that's where my ignorance comes in a little bit. I'd like to just do a little more research and kind of look at things, but I would be worried about doing something that might upset the political apple cart, as it were.
So would we. Yeah. And in fact we did brave some of that already. So
I mean, yeah, like given the people who are involved in this and everything, I know you all are sensitive to these topics and whatnot. And for me, like seeing the strength of the community you're bringing and the people sitting at the table who are kind of like organizing this, it lends a little bit of credence to the notion that this is a collaboration that's happening across organizational boundaries and everything. And that to me is like really cool to see. But yeah, don't want to piss off the other people too, right? So yeah.
True, with you on that.
Yeah, there's probably some value in just going and spelunking and paying attention to who is playing in the Crow repo. And you can see cross-plane people in there. You can see end user companies in there. You can see all sorts of people, and then you can kind of decide. Yes, there's a lot more that Crow can do as a SIG sub project in terms of, governance. It becomes much easier because people could be a maintainer of a SIG subproject in Kubernetes without it being a political against my competing CNCF project. Like bringing people in as maintainers ends up being easier, that sort of thing. So all sorts of logistics there. All right. Do we have anything else that we should discuss today? Thank you all for staying late. This was a long and exciting topic and a long and exciting call.
Yeah, thanks again for the time. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, folks. Take care.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Bridget. Later, everybody.